But some conservatives want to delay those elections, saying the Republican Party needs leaders who will confidently and skillfully present a persuasive, coherent version of internal Republican leadership elections are set to kick off today on the Hill with the party. Internal Republican leadership elections are set to kick off today on the Hill with the party 1 seat away from taking control of the House. But some conservatives want to delay those elections, saying the Republican Party needs leaders who will confidently and skillfully present a persuasive, coherent version of who we are, what we stand for, and what we will do. We strongly urge both houses of Congress to postpone the formal leadership elections until after the December 6th runoff in Georgia and all election results are fully decided. Doug Collins is a former Georgia congressman and former ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins me live on set.
I'm here.
Good morning. It's great to see you.
Good to see you as well.
So these leadership elections, a lot going on. And the first thing I want to ask you, because this is something that a lot of Americans aren't familiar with, how do they work? Give us the basics here.
Well, they walk you into a closed room, they lock everything down. I'm kidding.
It's very hostile.
It's very terrible. No, it's sort of imagine for Americans, because sometimes it's hard to understand it. Think of back in your high school days when you were electing a class president. Okay, everybody gets together and it puts friend against friend. It puts, well, I want you to vote for this one. And that's exactly what it's like, except it's a very closed number group. The interesting thing about this one is elections are not, frankly, over in many ways. You got a lot of California races that are not called. That always happens with 1 or 2 races, but we've got about 8 or 12 that are still sort of out there. But really, the Republicans themselves will get into a room, and by majority vote, then they will elect their leadership team. Now, the only difference is the Speaker has to then go to the floor of the House on January 3rd and is elected by both Republicans and Democrats, which is interesting because the Speaker truly is the Speaker of the House, not necessarily the Speaker of the Republican Party.
Right. Yeah, so you do raise a very interesting part of this whole thing is that the leadership elections are starting before all the returns are in. I mean, how do you do that? Because that means that some members of Congress won't get a vote.
That is, unless for some reason they're bringing in the maybe members, but then again, that's a vote that says, well, if they're going to be members, they're not going to be members. So really what they're trying to do is it's always in leadership's best interest to go ahead and have the election. Yeah. This has been the concern by many of the members saying, why are we rushing this? We've got time to do it. What Kevin McCarthy and other leadership teams are saying, we need to be in place now because we've got a lot to do. And it is a lot to do if they're to take over on January 3rd.
Right, and here's where things get really interesting is that there's some opposition in the Republican Party to both Kevin McCarthy and mainly Mitch McConnell. Is that a legitimate threat to their leadership positions? And if not them, then who?
Probably not as much to Mitch McConnell because that one is done internally, no vote on the floor of the Senate. That's all done with a majority-only vote. And as Tom Cotton basically said, nobody stepped up to run against Mitch McConnell. Now, the difference is in the Senate, in the House, is that if, say, they only have a 219-seat majority, come January 3rd, you go to the floor, you need 218 to become Speaker. And look, historically, in the last 5, while I was there for 4 or 5 years, we always had 5 or 6 or even more vote against the nominee from the Republican Party for Speaker. Kevin could only conceivably lose 2 people and could not become Speaker, even though if he had the majority
But then
support.
what would happen if he lost those 2?
Then they would go to a second ballot, which, look, this would never happen. They will know for sure going in. But I will say this, if there's only 2 or 3 holding out, there will be a massive amount of pressure on those people to not do that because it is massive disruption. It means that the Republicans can't do the basics of getting a leadership vote. All right.
So when all's said and done, you think it's going to be Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi? Nancy Pelosi's also a question mark because.
Yeah, that one is interesting to me because every indicator before this election was Nancy Pelosi was going to step aside.
Right.
I still think that's probably where that may end up because if not, that leadership side on the Democrat side is gone.
Yeah. Also this, your home state of Georgia, obviously there's a major runoff race there. Yeah, news to you? Not really. And Herschel Walker just raised $11 million since kicking off his runoff campaign against Raphael Warnock. He also has this ad out. So things are really kicking off. Some people are saying that because Democrats are going to control the Senate no matter what with the deciding vote with Vice President Kamala Harris, this election matters less. Is that true?
No, it does not.
Okay,
It matters probably even more because if you were to a couple of quick things. Number one, if Raphael Warnock were to win, it would be 51-49, which means that the Democrats have complete control of the Senate. In other words, there'll be one more member in the committees so they can bring bills, legislation. Where they've had to struggle with that this Congress is because if they're ever tied in the committees, they have to bring it to the floor, which is a much harder process to do. They get one more, they don't have to do that. The other issue is really just a momentum change from going into the next election cycle, which again is going to be very good for Republicans.
Right.
So it matters. But I will say this, it is affecting turnout.
Doug Collins, it's great to see you in studio. Thank